Morning, everybody. I'm Sean Hocking. I'm the co-presenter, organizer with Tia. I'm nowhere near as good a public speaker as she is. Essentially, as she said, we're trying to take the idea of conferences and conversations about cannabis onto the next level beyond money, because I'm sick and tired about hearing every single conversation about cannabis is about money. And I've got some wonderful people in the room. One of my favorites I'm looking at straight there with the hat on is Daryl, and people like him are going to be introducing ideas that make us really think about how we talk about cannabis and other drugs rather than just the same old tired language, because I think language is really, really important. So I really want to have people keep that in their mind. I mean, sitting next to him is Ricky, and he's an environmental lawyer who also works in cannabis. And if you look around the world, nobody's talking about environmental law with relation to cannabis. Over there, I've got Mitch Chargo from the US. Yeah, I'm going to point people out, you included, even though you said you'd sit at the back. And he is trying to work with communities and indigenous communities in the US to actually make state government and these communities and their governments actually achieve something that's workable. And I think it's really important to have these conversations. Now, if you go to Vegas, Berlin, Madrid, you know all the names of the places, you're not going to hear these conversations. So we're really interested in pushing this forward and trying to create a conversation that goes all year. We also do an event at the University of Sydney. I'm hopefully talking about doing an event at a university in the UK. I was talking last night about trying to do something in Brazil. And if we can create a community, I hate that word, but a group of people or individuals who start talking about these ideas, I think they will spread to that wider cannabis industry world. And you're sort of already seeing it. I follow the media every day, and I see the ideas that Tia and I have been talking about for the last couple of years. They're suddenly appearing in different places. And interestingly, last week in The Guardian, Daryl will, of course, hate the language, but they were talking about, it's decriminalization over commercialization. So at least that people are stepping towards thinking about these ideas. So let's have the conversation. Not everybody's going to agree with one another about what we're talking, what they're talking about, but I think it's an open and frank discussion, as they like to say. Two things I'd like to mention before we speak. We have Steve speak to us, and Steve apologised for not being here, but he had an operation and he literally can't sit on an aeroplane seat. So he's doing his presentation this morning, talking to everybody about these ideas, and then we've got a live Q&A in the moot court at 5 p.m. when nothing else is happening. As many as you come to it, and it'll be a Q&A session with him, and it's just an open dialogue, as they say. I'd like to remember at this point two people. For South Africans, we lost Sharon Price only 10 days ago. She was going to be a speaker here, so we'd like to just remember her throughout this event. And the other person I'd like to remember is a lawyer who was the first lawyer to support me, basically, a guy called Peter Homburg, who was, he was a lawyer for a white shoe law firm, as they call them in the States, really big end of town. But he was interested in speaking to people about new ideas and not just about, the commercial law work that he did. And really, it was in conversations with him 5-6 years ago that I got the kernel for trying to think about things a little bit differently. So there's a presentation about his work on Saturday morning as well that will be in here, presented by one of his colleagues from Germany, and she'll be patching in live on Teams to do that. So thank you all for coming. Fantastic to have you all here, and I hope you just have an interesting time and we make new friends, as they say in kids TV. That's what we want to do. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody.
Well, hello, and good day. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Atia, and thank you, University of Cape Town, for bringing us all together. And thank you, honored audience, for lending me your ears and your minds for the next 15 to 20 minutes. We find ourselves today at a critical junction. In the half-century since its birth, the cannabis freedom movement has become one of the most successful social justice movements of the past 100 years. And we've created the conditions for the birth of a multi-billion-dollar global industry, an industry that has supercharged political change, that has provided a livelihood and a home for many of us, but which may be failing to live up to the lessons that cannabis teaches us. It's been less than a decade, just 8 years, since my home state of California legalized adult use cannabis. And since then, a wave of reform has swept across the map. Nearly every U.S. state and dozens of countries around the world have taken some significant step away from prohibition. Just weeks ago, the federal government of the United States, after 42 years of vehement denial, finally admitted that indeed there are medical therapeutic uses for cannabis and has begun the process of rescheduling from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. This move by the United States will reverberate through the entire drug control architecture. It will remove one of the last constraints on countries who want to reform their laws and have been anxiously and eagerly awaiting some kind of signal from the United States. Now, with the fear of retaliation removed, dozens more countries can be expected to follow suit and begin dismantling prohibition. Millions more people around the world will soon be free of the fear of arrest and prosecution and will have safe and legal access to Mother Nature's most therapeutic plant. Even before this green light of U.S. rescheduling, Germany and the UK moved forward and enacted medical cannabis laws starting back in 2018. This legislation critically allowed for imported cannabis, relaunching legal international cannabis commerce after a century-long interruption. For the first time in the modern era, cannabis is moving across borders not only through informal markets, but through regulated supply chains with export and import permits, inspections, and testing. This new European market started small, but it's recently seen exponential growth. This year, its total value should reach around $2 billion USD. It is another critical step forward, another opening signal, the first channel through which exporters, importers, and customs authorities are learning how to move cannabis across borders. And this spread of the medical cannabis spark that we lit in California is very gratifying to me and the other early pioneers. It's something that we can pat ourselves on the back about. But medical cannabis is not the ultimate objective of our movement. It is a nose under the tent. It is the tip of a spear. It is a strategic milestone on the longer road to full cannabis freedom. 50 years ago, in the very earliest days, when we were still uncovering all of the information that had been hidden from us, we didn't know about the medical or industrial uses of cannabis. We hadn't learned about the endocannabinoid system or terpenes or any cannabinoids other than THC. But there was one thing that we did know, and that was that this plant helped us be more like the people we really wanted to be. It helped us align our daily actions with the yearnings of our hearts. And we figured that if it operated that way for us, it would operate the same way for other people. And we had enough faith in the human heart to believe that if we made spreading this plant our mission all over the globe, all over the planet, everywhere, that one day, eventually, we would live in the world that we dreamed of, a world ruled by peace and love instead of a world ruled by greed and war. And I still have that faith today. Medical cannabis will serve patients, people who are suffering and maybe even perishing without it. But adult use cannabis will serve entire societies. It'll provide a healthy alternative to alcohol, pharmaceuticals, and tobacco, to enhance our sleep, music, and intimacy, to spark our creativity, to open our souls to spiritual connection, to help us come closer to Mother Nature, and help us learn nonviolent ways of resolving conflict. Fortunately, as medical cannabis was rolled out in the earliest states and countries like California and Canada, and ever-increasing numbers of regular citizens or their family members, people who had no prior contact with cannabis, had positive therapeutic outcomes, the stigma surrounding the plant rapidly dissipated and adult use laws followed on, were enacted. And as these adult use laws took hold in state after state, we saw a wide range of public health benefits, a drop in violent crime, a drop in opiate prescriptions and overdoses, and a sustained and significant decrease in alcohol consumption. Now, assuming that all of Europe and the United States eventually follow the same pattern and legalize adult use cannabis, and consumers continue to substitute cannabis for alcohol, the global market will expand from a narrow pharmaceutical niche to one of the great agricultural and consumer product markets of the 21st century. The North American and adult use markets combined would quite likely reach $500 billion and might hit $1 trillion or more. And if all of the countries of the global south also move to adult use legalization, they could well add another $500 billion to that figure, or form a trading bloc of their own. But before we dive too deeply into that bright future, let's first remember the dark history that brought us to this point. Long before Prohibition was implemented, long before it was even a concept, cannabis had been part of the everyday life across large parts of Asia and Africa and within diasporic communities throughout the Americas and the Caribbean. A medicine, a sacrament, a companion in labor, and a source of solace and celebration. Cannabis wasn't banned in the global south because local communities suddenly rejected a plant they had successfully used for centuries or even millennia. It wasn't the outcome of a science-based public health process. It was prohibited because colonial governments, settler regimes, and a U.S.-led drug control system imposed criminalization from the outside. And that imposition, that prohibition, carried terrible consequences. Incalculable years of unjust incarceration, broken families, over-policing, shattered livelihoods, and even deaths. One would hope for some measure of restorative justice as the new legal industry unfolds in former colonial powers. But so far, most of the cannabis entering Europe's market is not coming from the global south. It's coming from Canada, Portugal, the Netherlands, and other countries with highly capitalized, highly controlled production systems. This is because the doorway into Europe's market has been built around EU GMP certification, a pharmaceutical manufacturing standard. This standard may sound neutral and technical, but in practice has operated as a massive barrier to entry. It carries high capital costs, complex facility requirements, expensive documentation systems, and a compliance architecture that favors large corporations. Meanwhile, the WHO estimates that alcohol causes 2.6 million deaths annually. It is a much more dangerous substance than cannabis, but wine and spirits entering Europe aren't required to meet EU GMP standards. The state doesn't certify a vineyard as a pharmaceutical supply chain before a bottle of wine can cross a border. It's treated as a regulated beverage product, tested and controlled through normal and established safety, traceability, labeling, and age restriction systems. We're now, unfortunately, seeing the same paradigm of cannabis overregulation spreading to the global south. A government legalizes cannabis, but models compliance on North American or European standards. A license system is created that local farmers and manufacturers cannot enter. Fees are too high. Facilities are too expensive. Traditional growers are treated as criminals unless they can suddenly start acting like pharmaceutical companies. That creates a two-tier economy, a formal legal industry for the wealthy and an informal illegal market for everyone else. Of course, we all agree that cannabis should meet public health standards, but who gets to define safety and who is excluded by that definition? After seeing this same dynamic of overregulation, market capture, and exclusion of legacy cannabis producers in my home state of California and in other newly legal states in the United States, I and other advocates developed what we now call the 3 golden pillars to answer that question with a simple, science-based, common-sense framework. First, test the product so consumers know it's safe. Perform these tests in a neutral third-party laboratory and ensure that the product is free from pesticides, heavy metals, microbes, and solvents. Second, label it accurately so consumers can make a fully informed choice. They should know what they're buying, how strong it is, what form it is in, and how to use it responsibly. And keep it away from children for all the obvious reasons. Age verification should be real, consistent, and enforceable. Like wine, coffee, tea, cocoa, and vanilla, cannabis expresses place. It has terroir. A plant grown in the mountains of Colombia is not the same as a plant grown in the hills of Jamaica, or the valleys of Lesotho, or the fields of South Africa. Those differences are not defects. They are basic building blocks of value. They are the foundation for regional brands, appellations, farmer cooperatives, and new forms of shared prosperity that have not even been invented yet. If we force all legal cannabis into an indoor pharmaceutical model, we erase that diversity before the world ever gets to taste it. We erase the sun and the soil and the farmer. We erase the very things that make cannabis one of the great agricultural plants of human history. The 3 golden pillars envision a broadly accessible industry with the same sales channels as alcohol. These vary by country, but generally include liquor, beer and wine stores, grocery stores, convenience stores, gas stations, nightclubs and discos, casinos, concerts, sporting events, airports and airplanes. Let's make sure that consumers have the safe and natural alternative of cannabis any place that alcohol, a deadly nerve poison that promotes aggressive behavior and violence, is on sale. For the same reasons, let the regulatory and tax burdens placed on this nascent industry be no greater than those already applied to alcohol. Lower the barriers to entry and attract legacy operators to the legal industry with accessible opportunities rather than unleashing Prohibition 2.0 to suppress them. It is time now, before it's too late, for the people and governments of the global South to take action to prevent the new cannabis economy from repeating the same old pattern. The global South grows the plant, carries the history, absorbs the risk, and preserves the knowledge, while the global North captures branding, distribution, capital, and profit. This is exactly what has happened with other high-value agricultural products like coffee, tea, cocoa, and vanilla. Producing countries in the South grow the crop, while external standards and certification systems determine market access and bargaining power. Join with me and other U.S. advocates to advance the three golden pillars as the basic foundation of all cannabis regulation, whether local, provincial, national, or international. Let's build not just a new industry, but a new kind of industry. An industry that welcomes in the legacy farmers and informal business people who built the market the corporations around the world are now trying to claim. An industry that recognizes the role that colonialism played in imposing cannabis prohibition and ensures that those inequities are not repeated in international commerce just getting started. The future for cannabis is bright, and it's getting brighter every day as the science becomes clearer and stigma fades further into the past. How bright it ultimately gets will depend on the choices that all of us in this room and all of our comrades and compatriots across the world gathering in similar meetings and conferences make. And the future, being the future, remains mostly unknowable. And there is still so much that we have to learn about this plant. But there's one truth that I know to be certain in the deepest part of my soul. This plant did not come to us to help concentrate power and wealth more narrowly. She came to us to spread freedom and prosperity more widely. If that vision resonates with you, then use the rest of this conference to seek out the other people for whom it resonated. Start thinking and talking about how you can apply the three golden pillars in your own communities, your own countries, your own businesses. And then when you go home, start taking action. Make the changes that are necessary so that we can one day live in a world where there's an honored place for Mother Nature's most valuable gift to human beings in every corner of our beautiful planet. And if you run into some obstacles you think you can't handle on your own, just reach out. I'm not hard to find.
A very Californian message, but it all makes sense. So you can agree and disagree with some of the stuff that Steve says. He's doing a Q&A. He'll be getting up really early in the morning for him this morning when we go to the moot court this afternoon at 5 o'clock. So hopefully you can join him and quiz him and question him on what he's saying and what he's thinking.